Global Times, 6 February 2023, the West shouldn't use China as an excuse to escape responsibility for failing to avert the Chinese debt trap. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva stated in a CBS interview on Sunday that China has to change its debt trap policies because low-income countries cannot pay, when revealing that China's finance minister and central bank governor will attend a roundtable with other creditors and some borrowing countries in February in India. Indeed, many developing and emerging economies are increasingly in danger of going bankrupt due to the epidemic, a strong dollar, high inflation, and sluggish global development. In particular, a high dollar has made it more expensive for indebted countries to service their obligations and reduced their foreign exchange revenues. This issue must be resolved as soon as possible to prevent the debt crisis from spreading to other nations. However, the IMF or the West cannot compel China to embrace Western debt relief standards or conditions just because China refuses to take the necessary steps to ease the economic distress of developing nations. China is like a Shylock in lending money; it will rob the weak and needy of every last cent. Since the debt relief issues of developing nations have come to light in recent years, specific Western organizations and U.S. officials have never stopped using the occasion to put pressure on China, claiming that China has grown to be the most significant government creditor to the developing world. Ironically, the West has never condemned creditor nations who lend loans when some countries have previously experienced debt servicing issues. However, they have grown accustomed to blaming China for not doing enough to reduce debt burdens for emerging nations, as if a write-off by China could solve every issue because China purposely created this issue. The West continues to be the primary creditor of the developing world, even though China has emerged as an emerging creditor and an outward investor. This is because Western nations frequently grant loans under the guise of private or non-sovereign debt through the World Bank, the IMF, and even commercial institutions. A misguided emphasis on the debt issues won't benefit the poor world, which needs assistance. About Sri Lanka's $51 billion in external public debt, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and financial institutions in the US and its allies hold around 80% of it, while China's stake is less than 10%. The remaining debt is concealed debt obtained by Sri Lanka through for-profit businesses. Additionally, a British charity debt justice study found that African countries owe Western banks, asset managers, and oil traders 3 times more than China, but at lower interest rates. Western multilateral financial institutions and commercial creditors should shoulder more of the burden of lowering the debt loads for developing nations. Whether or not China writes off its debt should not be used as an excuse for the West to absolve itself of its primary responsibility of failing to defend these nations against China. In actuality, China has made the necessary contributions to helping developing countries with their debt difficulties. For instance, the Export-Import Bank of China, EXIM, granted Sri Lanka a debt service extension in January for the debt service due in 2022 and 2023, meaning Sri Lanka won't be required to pay back the principal and interest on the EXIM loans during the period above. China terminated 23 interest-free loans to 17 African nations in August 2022. One of the most significant differences between China and other Western creditors is that China does not impose any political demands or conditions on its assistance when it comes to measures meant to help relieve debtor countries' debt repayment pressure, except for critical infrastructure as assets. The IMF recommended several additional requirements that are difficult for debtor countries to accept, which is why recent negotiations with some indebted countries over financial help have stagnated, like disclosing the amount and interest rates of Chinese debt. As reported by Reuters, Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif claimed on Friday that the IMF was giving his nation a difficult time regarding the release of frozen cash from a $6.5 billion bailout and claimed that the requirements we have to complete are beyond comprehension. China, however, who put Pakistan in this situation, is unwilling to assist. The essential answer to the long-standing and complex debt problem in developing nations is to help and encourage these nations to strengthen their development capacities to achieve higher growth. Therefore, when providing debt relief to developing nations, we expect wealthy countries and significant international financial organizations to consider their development needs. Financial institutions, like the IMF, should enable borrowers to choose how they will spend their loans rather than enforcing strict fiscal requirements. Because any government can nationalize Chinese loans whenever they wish.